Good evening, everyone. This is Mike O'Malley here with the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for September 19th, 2022, around 6:40 p.m. Eastern Time. We have a lot to talk about this evening, including Hurricane Fiona finally pulling away from Hispaniola. Could it be the worst storm to impact Bermuda in decades? So let's go and jump straight into everything. Taking a wide look across the tropical Atlantic this evening as the sun begins to set, we notice that we have Hurricane Fiona finally pulling away from the islands here and certainly from Hispaniola and Puerto Rico. And then we have this tropical wave back here that is, as the sun begins to set, we'll be talking about this closer to the end of today's video. Taking a look here at the zoomed in satellite image as the sun begins to set, a few things of note here. First of all, if we go back and look at the very beginning of the loop here, we notice how that we had a pretty decent eye structure that was already popping out. And the Hurricane Center did upgrade this to a Category 2 hurricane. We notice that in recent frames, we've had substantial deep convection bursting over the low-level circulation on the western side there. If we look at the zoomed-in visible satellite, we notice that we have an eye that is clearing this evening, indicating the presence of significant intensification that is likely resuming now at this point. Now, you notice right here that the island chain of the Turks and Caicos in southeastern Bahamas is located right here. And the storm is going to be moving something like this in that general direction during the next 12 to 24 hours. And so some pretty substantial impacts might occur to portions of the Turks and Caicos. Now, if we look at the official track forecast, this is now a Category 2 hurricane and now is expected to intensify into the season's first major hurricane and become a Category 4 to the south-southwest of Bermuda on Wednesday morning here. And so again, after passing the Turks and Caicos here, after intensifying into a major hurricane, this makes that turn towards the northeast and begins to approach Bermuda. And right now, there is a really about a 50, 60, 70 mile spread where the center could potentially even impact the island directly at this point, and certainly bring some very unprecedented conditions to that area, some of the worst that has been seen in decades for that area. Now, if we take a look here at the tropical cyclone advisories, there are just a few remaining advisories for Hispaniola. We have a hurricane watch that remains in effect for the eastern part of Hispaniola and the Dominican Republic this evening. Those watches will likely be canceled as the storm begins to pull away. We do have a hurricane warning for portions of the Turks and Caicos and a tropical storm warning to the north of that. Now, the rainfall potential is still going to be the biggest thing, but also the impact risk, the overall impact here. We notice that, again, we have still remaining a high risk of impacts across portions of central and the western part of Puerto Rico. This is due to continued heavy rainfall across the area. This is not going to go anywhere really until probably tomorrow. So some flooding concerns are likely there. And there is still that high risk across portions of the far northern Dominican Republic here. This is, again, a little bit of uncertainty there with the rainfall forecast. And then, of course, there is a significant risk of impacts to portions of the Turks and Caicos. If you look at the overall rainfall forecast, again, the numbers have come down substantially from what they were even this morning. Now, we are still expecting rainfall across portions of the eastern Dominican Republic and Hispaniola that could top out around 4 inches of additional rainfall. And we could be talking about another 2.5 to 3 inches of additional rain, potentially even as high as 4 inches of additional rainfall across portions of Puerto Rico. Again, locally higher amounts will vary, again, depending on the training band setup. But still some very significant concerns, and certainly that's one of the reasons why there is that high risk for potential flooding and that high impact risk overall, because portions of Puerto Rico have already seen over 30 inches of rain, very significant, and unfortunately that will surpass Hurricane Maria from 2017. Now, if we take a look here at the HWRF forecast for how strong this system could get, this is the HWRF 200 millibar wind profile. This is the 06Z run here, valid for 8 p.m. this evening. We notice that the storm is now pulling away from Puerto Rico or from Hispaniola at this point and is deepening very substantially. And the pressure of 968 millibars would not be surprising, maybe even a little bit lower than that according to what some of the recent guidance has shown. Now, over the next couple of days, we are still going to be dealing with a trough that is located over Florida. And what this trough is going to do is induce a little bit of southwesterly vertical shear over top of the storm. However, this is not expected to be that strong, and as a result of that, the combination of moisture and sufficient sea surface temperatures and upper ocean heat content should allow for this to strengthen into the season's first major hurricane. And then it's on a collision course for Bermuda. We noticed that sometime here, this is 11 a.m. Thursday, we have a storm that is approaching Bermuda at this point, moving towards the northeast. And so if we take a look here at the zoomed in view here, we notice that again, this approaches Bermuda within just a few days, and this is the island of Bermuda right here. That's the island of Bermuda. And so the storm is moving towards the north and east like this. And we notice that the wind field of the storm is massive. We're talking about over 200 miles from kind of south to north, and over 300 miles from east to west there. So very substantial wind field. And this will begin to impact Bermuda, and on the particular run of the H wharf, it does bring hurricane conditions over the island of Puerto Rico, or over the island of Bermuda rather. And if we actually look at the HMON forecast for the same time as well, we notice that it is very similar, bringing the core, not the core, but certainly some hurricane force winds to the area. And certainly they have not seen hurricane force winds in a while, and certainly not this strong of a storm on the eastern side, dealing with all of that onshore flow and significant moisture. So this could be a real problem for Bermuda. And if this is to shift maybe even about 20 miles to the south, we're talking almost improbable to determine at a 4 to 5 day time frame. We could be talking about some real substantial impacts for the island of Bermuda. So it is imperative that the entire island of Bermuda is preparing for what likely could be a major hurricane impact to the island of Bermuda sometime Thursday evening going into Friday, and then clearing out during the day on Friday afternoon going into Saturday morning. So we could be talking about a very dangerous system here, and so it is something to kind of keep in mind. Now, beyond just Bermuda as well, we also have threats to Atlantic Canada. This is the super ensemble blend here. This counts about 139 different ensemble members, including the deterministic Euro, GFS, and UK Met models. So again, here is Bermuda right about here. And of course, now this most of these members are pretty consistent on bringing the core very close to Bermuda. And then we notice that, again, the storm takes a left bend here towards the northwest as it interacts with an upper level low that is over New England and the northeast U.S. And so this will likely kick it back to most certainly impact somewhere in Newfoundland and Atlantic Canada. And officially, the Hurricane Center forecast has this remaining a full-blown hurricane up in Newfoundland, making landfall all the way, literally all the way up here. We're talking a full-blown hurricane. Now, it will be transitioning into a post-tropical cyclone at that point. But to have a full-on Category 2 hurricane, warm core system that far north, I mean, that's, 48 north? I mean, that's crazy. And so there will be very significant impacts if that forecast does come to fruition. There will be very significant impacts to portions of Atlantic Canada, Newfoundland, and portions of the Canadian Maritimes. So it is also imperative that if you live up there in that region, you are also taking precautions, because there could be a storm impacting your region within the next 5 to 6 days, give or take. So we're looking at the potential for two systems to be, or really one system to be impacting two areas unprecedentedly. Very crazy, and certainly needs to be monitored for additional forecast trends. Now, real quickly, out across the rest of the Atlantic Basin, we also have a new system. This is from 2 p.m., but we have a new system that we are monitoring to the east of the Leeward Islands and Windward Islands at this point. This is not been designated as an invest, but this will likely be designated probably within the next few days. This will be moving into the Caribbean within about 5 to 6 days, and thereafter, some additional development of this system is likely, actually, as this enters a pretty favorable environment. It will be sheared a little bit from Fiona's outflow, but once it gets over here towards Jamaica and whatnot, we could be talking about a system that is intensifying as it heads into the West Caribbean. That's a long ways from now, but just something to throw out there that a lot of the models are going and crazy with that and picking up on it, so it is something to monitor. All right. So that being said, I do hope you have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Of course, I am Michael O'Malley. I'll be talking to you guys again some more tomorrow.